Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Let's Talk About. Today we're going to talk about the climate emergency. You may have noticed that this week we've got COP26 happening in Glasgow, Scotland. This is an event that happens every 5 years where world leaders get together and try to tackle climate change. Or as some claim, where they pretend to tackle climate change. Yeah, today we're dealing with a heavy issue and we're going to look at lots of interesting words and phrases. Words and phrases like greenhouse gases, fossil fuels, deforestation, leads to extreme weather, reduce CO2 emissions, petition to have them removed, maintain a bipartisan position, in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry, and many, many more. So strap yourself in and let's talk about the climate emergency. Okay, let's start with the science. Much of the problem with climate change comes from burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. These resources are also known as non-renewable energy or non-renewables. We still use a lot of non-renewables to power our homes, keep our cars running, and to fuel our industries. In fact, over 85% of the world runs on non-renewable energy. All this burning creates greenhouse gases. In a nutshell, the sun's radiation normally would hit the planet, heat it up, and then bounce off the surface of the planet and head off back to space. But these greenhouse gases act as a sort of roadblock. They reflect some of the radiation back to the Earth's surface when it's on its way out. So the more greenhouse gas molecules we have in the atmosphere, the hotter it gets. But it isn't just burning fossil fuels that can cause the increase in greenhouse gases. They're also increased by deforestation. That's people cutting down the trees in rainforests like the Amazon. That's because the forests absorb the CO2 in the atmosphere and convert it back to oxygen. So less forest means more CO2, and CO2 is a greenhouse gas. This whole process, by the way, is called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect leads to extreme weather like forest fires, droughts, which is not enough water, and floods, which is far too much water, as well as more water, rising sea levels. The rising sea levels are caused by the polar ice caps melting and adding water to the oceans, but also by the oceans generally expanding, because as water gets hotter, it gets bigger, or it expands. So our main goal, of course, is to reduce CO2 emissions. That means we have to set emissions targets, which we actually have already done. The world leaders at COP26, and I think back in COP25, have already agreed on a net zero target by 2050. That's a net zero target by 2050. That means that we balance the amount of greenhouse gas produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. So if you're producing, let's say, X amount of greenhouse gases through your industry, you need to remove X amount of greenhouse gases through other things like forestation or carbon capture, which is basically taking the greenhouse gases produced by factories and catching them before they get into the atmosphere. So and how do we do all that? Well, there have been a lot of initiatives to try to solve the issue on an individual level. We hear a lot of talk about our carbon footprint and how you can offset your carbon footprint, otherwise known as simply offsetting. You can offset your plane journey, for example, by getting someone to plant a tree for you. Some people have even suggested that you can do your bit for the environment by giving up plastic straws. Yep, plastic straws. Give up plastic straws and you'll save the world, surely. Of course, some people have criticized these initiatives as a way of shifting the responsibility onto the individual and away from the fossil fuel industry and industry in general. Speaking of industry. A lot of large industries have been caught out greenwashing, meaning that they've been caught lying about what they do in order to make themselves look more environmentally friendly than they already are, or than they really are. Another way to tackle the climate emergency is by increasing the use of renewable energy, or renewables. In other words, getting our power from more renewable resources like the sun, solar energy, the wind power, rivers, hydroelectricity, or even the heat from inside the earth, geothermal power, which, if you ask me, is damn cool. Heat from the center of the earth powering our industry. How cool is that? Anyway, solar energy requires using solar panels to harness the sun's energy. Obviously, this is most useful in hotter countries like Australia or Chad. Wind power requires the use of massive wind turbines that look a little bit like alien windmills. They're effective in windier environments, of course, but some residents who live around these wind turbines sometimes complain about them being an eyesore, and that they also petition to have them removed. Hydroelectricity requires the use of dams to block and then release huge quantities of water at once. And of course, there have always been activist movements calling for action on the climate emergency. The most prevalent at the moment is Extinction Rebellion, who block roads, protest en masse, and maintain a bipartisan position, which means that they don't align themselves with any one particular political party. All of this with an aim to put the climate emergency on the top of politicians' agendas. So, can we expect some real action and some real change from COP26 this week? Well, I guess we'll just find out, won't we? It's a bit early to tell. However, with a lot of government lobbying by the fossil fuel industry, a lot of people are actually quite skeptical about this conference, fearing that most governments are in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry and in the pockets of big business. Not least, the Queen of England, Lizzie herself, who was recorded recently saying, "Extraordinary, isn't it? I've been hearing all about COP. It's really irritating when they talk, but they don't do." So watch out. Even Lizzie is skeptical. And what better way to finish a video than a quote by a frustrated monarch? So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Of course, this is YouTube. You know the rules. You're here. You're still here. You've enjoyed the video. You've got something out of it. Just click the buttons, 2 buttons, like, subscribe. Helps me out a big deal. Takes you a second. Those are the rules of YouTube. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.